Welcome to the Thresholds of Reality. Today, I am not joined by anybody yet. Hopefully Kyle shows up, but we'll see. I was supposed to be talking to a guest and they canceled last minute. That does happen occasionally. Today, I'm going to be covering a topic that I've been wanting to cover for a while. We just haven't had a guest to come on and talk about it. So I thought I'd take the opportunity today to talk about the recent UFO hearings centering around Major David Grush and see if we can answer the question, are these legit or are they Psy-Op? So strap in as we explore the edges of the unknown. All right, so the claims being made by Major David Grush basically center on three things. One, that the U.S. government is in possession of downed alien spacecraft, things that we call UAPs nowadays. Is just like, I don't know why they changed the parlance from UFOs to UAPs. I think UFO was probably getting a little too bogged down with this idea of like crazy people. But then that the U.S. government has downed UFO spacecraft. They also are in possession of what he called non-human biologics. In other words, creatures or DNA or some sort of physical residue belonging to non-human creatures. And then that there's a government cover-up to hide those elements from us. That's basically the claim. And then there's details regarding all of these different things around it. But for me, it just smells funky. It doesn't pass the smell test to me. And I'll explain why. So let's look at the claims and the evidence supporting them. So on June 5th, 2023, there was a publication called The Debrief that published a story regarding Grush's claims of a UFO cover-up. It's self-funded, and it describes itself as dealing with frontier science, in other words, fringe scientific topics. The central claims were that Major Grush was getting ready to break a story regarding UFOs, and then he was starting to get harassing calls related to them. So he decided he was going to break the story with The Debrief. And the authors of this article claim that Grush is beyond reproach and that his claims about secret UFO retrieval and reverse engineering programs are legitimate. Well, then Grush was brought before Congress in kind of dramatic fashion to discuss the evidence of these claims to Congress. And he laid out that there is substantive evidence that white-collar crime took place to conceal UFO programs, and that he had interviewed officials who said that people had been killed to conceal the programs, stating that the director of AARO, Dr. Sean Kilpatrick, was trying to keep these things under wraps. Okay, well, look, this is stuff that a lot of folks in kind of the frontier sciences, quote unquote, have been talking about for a long time. Government cover-ups are nothing new. You've got things like MK Ultra, which are clearly government cover-ups. The JFK assassination is another example of a government cover-up. A lot of CIA operations, the NSA's collection of cell phone data cover-up. So the idea of a government cover-up isn't anything new. But now now he's coming forward and saying that he's got over 40 secondhand witness testaments or accounts related to UFOs and the government UFO program. Okay, well, let's keep looking at it. Let's keep going. Let's look at these folks. Did they have an interest in feeding him something, unsubstantiated, unsubstantiable, in order to provide cover for some other military operation or the other operation? The witnesses that he provides, he says that Grush stated that he was informed in the course of his official duties of a multi-decade UAP crash retrieval and reverse engineering program to which he was denied access. In other words, he has no firsthand knowledge of this UFO program, retrieval program. He believes that the U.S. government is in possession of UFOs based on interviews with 40 witnesses over 4 years. So over 4 years' time, he was able to get information from 40 different individuals to say that there's UFOs. And he states that even non-human biologics, whatever that's supposed to mean, from pilots of the crafts, were in government possession as well. And that personal knowledge, he has personal, or that when he was asked if he had personal knowledge of people who've been harmed or injured in efforts to cover up or conceal the government's possession of extraterrestrial technology, he said yes, but he was unable to provide details in a public setting. Okay. Well, consider me a skeptic. There's an old saw says that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. And when these claims came out, there was a humongous collective yawn among the American populace. And that caused a lot of heads to scratch. Why? Why is it the case that hello explosion noise? Yeah, I had a guest cancel on me, so I'm going over a topic of my own choosing. You're an alien? Is that why your name is Explosion Noise? Anyway, so extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and there are lots of people in journalism, in news media, and they were also collectively nonplussed by the revelations in Grush's testimony, because he did not have extraordinary evidence. He had 40 people who were not coming forward, 40 people who themselves were not willing to state on the record and under oath that what they were saying was true. I mean, I don't even know that Grush actually believes what he was saying was true. So there's just a lot of things where I'm like, okay, it's all hearsay testimony. He has no eyewitness accounts. I'm not saying that the government doesn't have UFOs in their possession. I'm just saying that Grush doesn't know jack squat about it. He doesn't know anything about it, if they do. So the idea that there's these non-human biologics that the government has possession of, like, that's Roswell stuff. That's been going on for ages. And what we need from Grush, or what we needed from Grush, was eyewitness account, photos, possession of actual materials that he's saying are in the government possession, maybe some of these samples of non-human biologics, whatever that means. That would have been great. Till then, it's all noise. And that's what we're trying to get to the bottom of. So the question today is, are these UFO hearings, are they legit? Are they Psy-Op? I have a lot of reason to believe that they are just Psy-Op, just meant to distract us. So first off, can you think of anything? Explosion noise says, I can give you a sample. You hold on to that sample. I don't need your sample. Take it to Congress. I don't need it. I wouldn't even have the ability to analyze it. But the things that we need from Grush to verify is something in his possession or something that he's seen firsthand. That's evidence. That's something that we can use. Everything that he presented to Congress was hearsay. Grush doesn't have anything substantive to provide. So let's now take a look at the statements of people in government and what they've said. So according to White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre, another noted liar, which just kind of throws all of this into doubt. She says, to date, AARO, the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, has not discovered any verifiable information to substantiate claims that any programs regarding the possession or reverse engineering of any extraterrestrial materials have existed in the past or exist currently. AARO is committed to following the data and its investigation wherever it leads. In other words, she's not going to comment. And that's typical. That's the typical government response. No comment. We don't know. We'll see. If anything turns up, we'll follow it. Mark Milley, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, says, quote unquote, aliens, or that there's some sort of government cover-up program. There's no evidence that such a thing exists. NASA says one of NASA's key priorities is the search of life elsewhere in the universe, but so far NASA has not found any credible evidence of extraterrestrial life. And there is no evidence that UAPs are extraterrestrial. Great point. However, NASA is exploring the solar system and beyond to help us answer fundamental questions, including whether we are alone in the universe. Just more government denials. I mean, is NASA trustworthy? Do people think NASA is trustworthy? I don't know. We've had on our program twice noted skeptic of the moon landing, Bart Sibrel. And one of the things that Bart brought to our attention and to our audience's attention was the fact that the current Artemis missions are not manned yet because they haven't found a way to deal with the Van Allen radiation belts. And the Van Allen radiation belts have been around for a long time. They're these magnetic fields that capture solar radiation in Earth orbit, and that any space vessel flying out of Earth orbit will have to necessarily pass through these belts and may expose the astronauts to lethal levels of radiation. And so the Artemis missions now are unmanned until they can figure out the solution to that problem. Well, if that's the case, how did they get through it in the 60s, in the 70s? How did they pass the Apollo astronauts to the moon through the Van Allen radiation belt? And there's not a really good explanation for that. You know, all the photographic stuff of it, you know, the angles of the shadows and the lighting and all that stuff, there's lots of counter explanations for that. But the radiation belt thing really sticks out. And Explosion Noise says, I know how to get through Van Allen radiation belts. I bet you do. But we don't. NASA doesn't. NASA doesn't know how to do that. Not without hurting somebody. So is NASA says that the Apollo missions had the technology, but they lost it because they destroyed their shuttles. Okay, what? That's strange. Why would they do that? Why was nobody taking notes? We have notes from Renaissance age mathematicians. Leonardo da Vinci took better notes than NASA. We know that he knew how to spin paper into like a helicopter because he left copious notes and detailed drawings about how to do that. But NASA doesn't do that. They didn't log patents regarding radiation shielding during the Cold War, where there was like a threat of nuclear annihilation and radiation, um, you know, radiation pollution. They didn't log patents for that kind of thing. I have a hard time believing that. So, is NASA trustworthy? That's another great question. I don't know. I would say probably not. Probably not trustworthy in a lot of this stuff. Um, but even then, like the part that got me really suspect regarding these claims was that the government was allowing somebody to come forward and testify before Congress without penalty, which means that it's in whatever agency's interest to have this out there. Why? Why? The government hasn't had the public's interest at heart for a long time. Otherwise, why were they dosing the public with LSD? you know, Explosion Noise says NASA is not trustworthy. I think you and I are on the same page. I don't think they are trustworthy. Maybe for different reasons, though. Okay, then we have more comments regarding Grush's testimony. Lindsey Graham says, the claims are unreasonable. He said, if we'd really found this stuff, there's no way you could keep it from coming out. There is something to that. NSA was not able to prevent Edward Snowden from revealing to the public the claims because he was able to find a journalist who he trusted. And likewise, if there are legitimate evidence, pieces of evidence regarding aliens, there would be somebody who would find somebody to come forward because it's a threat, a potential threat. So it's possible that that's true, that if there was evidence, it would have come forward. Senator Josh Hawley says, I'm not surprised necessarily by these latest allegations because it sounds pretty close to what they kind of grudgingly admitted to us in the briefing related to the Navy and military reviewing the video evidence of UFOs. It's just wild to me that none of this stuff really seems to, it's not going anywhere. Like the video evidence of the Tic Tacs or the flying Tic Tacs, it just doesn't seem convincing to me. It doesn't seem compelling. I feel like there would be a lot more interest in it publicly if they were more compelling. And personally, there would be more interest in it. But there's when I see it, I'm like, I can think of a lot of ways that that's faked. Yeah, if this kind of stuff had come out in the 50s before Photoshop, before a lot of special effects, that's a different story. But it's just hard for me to believe. It's off topic, but yes, I do. I do like Thor. At any rate, we have now Senator Kirsten Gillibrand. She said she intends to hold a hearing to assess whether rogue UAP programs existed that no one is providing oversight for. Marco Rubio, basically she wants to get to the bottom of it. Marco Rubio says there are people who have come forward to share information with our committee over the last couple of years with firsthand knowledge. and that they were potentially some of the people referred to by Grush. He doesn't know. He doesn't know for sure. It's just more smoke and mirrors. So I need something concrete. I would like to believe that there's aliens or people coming to Earth, and that the folks who have been abducted or had encounter experiences, that they're not suffering from a mental delusion. I'd like to think that if there were an intergalactic or interplanetary threat, that we would be working together publicly to protect the Earth from such a threat. But I have no confidence in any of the evidence that's been put forth so far, either from Major Grush or anybody else publicly, with respect to these latest hearings. There were additional AOC asked the three witnesses, if you were me, where would you look regarding answers to UAP questions and evidence to validate their claims? And Grush said, I'd be happy to give you more information in a closed environment. I can tell you specifically, but he didn't want to make it public. Why not? Why not just tell us? Absolute Geek, thanks for tuning in, Matt. What if they are interdimensional and not from space? Yeah, what if? Then what are we worried about? What does it matter? There's nothing we can do about it. It's the same as like an angels or demons, or ghosts. There's what are we going to do about it? If they're interdimensional, what can we do about it? How can you even have evidence of something that is intangible like that? It really begs a lot of questions. For example, if we're talking about a species or a race or technologically advanced civilization such that they can travel between spatial dimensions or temporal dimensions, why are they crashing here on Earth? Why is Earth the place where they're breaking down and being captured? What's so special about Earth that they keep winding up here? Maybe it's the case that life is much rarer than our math would lead us to believe. Maybe it is almost unique to Earth. And Explosion says it's the MCU. It's the movies. Marvel cinema is what makes Earth special. Yeah, absolutely. We've got some Infinity Stones here. People are trying to get their hands on. What if they're interdimensional, not from space? It's one of those things. It's just like, that doesn't help drive the conversation anywhere. We have interactions with neutrinos and other kind of non-interactive particles all the time. And it doesn't really affect the Earth at all. Neutrinos are passing through us all the time. So what difference does it make if we have interdimensional beings comprised of neutrinos or neutrino-like particles passing through us? It doesn't make any difference. But that's not the claim. The claim is not that they're interdimensional, not from space. The claim is that the government is covering up its own possession of spacecraft and alien pilots. So where's the evidence? You got to give us something. All right, let's get into some more of these comments. Reporting on past psychiatric treatment received by Grush, Ken Klippenstein of The Intercept, which is an interesting publication in its own right, reported that Grush was hospitalized in 2014 and 2018 in 2 incidents involving drunkenness and suicidal comments. The police records from that time said could be related to PTSD. The 2018 incident included a few days of psychiatric treatment as well. This to me sounds like an effort to cast doubt on Grush's credibility more than anything. And The Intercept is an interesting publication because it was basically established to counter narratives regarding the CIA and the FBI that they were producing, that the government was producing. And then the founder, Glenn Greenwald, had to leave The Intercept because it was not going to do that mission anymore. It was going to accept the government narrative and perpetuate the three-letter agency's narratives. So it's another thing where I'm like, okay, is this even credible? Is Ken Klippenstein credible? Where is he getting this information? All right, so we've got some more kind of esoteric stuff from AGP. It depends on how you perceive time. Is it linear or not? I feel like maybe our use of nuclear power is potentially affecting their dimension. So they are coming here to try to figure it out, what we are up to. I mean, that's an interesting theory. Certainly, nuclear energy has been a game changer on Earth. It's put life as we know it in the crosshairs. And it's easy to think that as we are concerned about our own annihilation, other species might be equally concerned about the annihilation of life in general, or human life, or other species of life here on Earth, simply because it is a rare thing. But it's also reproducible. Life is reproducible in many aspects. We're now at the stage where we can clone and extract DNA, clone DNA. So it seems to me that there's probably nothing super unique about life itself, but maybe the Earth and the conditions that make it such a habitable place. Okay. So we'll keep going through some more concerns about Major Grush. The Guardian journalist Nick Pope, who's made a career of investigating UFOs, expressed hope that confirmation or debunking of Russia's claims would be quick in coming. It hasn't been the case. So far, the best evidence Grush has come up with, besides his own word, is the government's denial. Yeah, I mean, the government denies a lot of stuff. That doesn't really help. Tucker Carlson gave publicity to the claims in the video through some Twitter posts. Joe Rogan's talked about them as well. I think Joe Rogan has got a healthy dose of skepticism for them too. And by and large, we're all kind of settling on this is all Psy-Op. And the reason why is because Grush said that intentional disinformation, Grush himself said that intentional disinformation was being pushed by the U.S. government to cast doubt on the veracity of non-human claims such as his. Okay, well, there's a guy from the U.S. government who was feeding someone else claims of UFO evidence. And perhaps the folks in the chat will know his name or recognize his name. But he was feeding someone else lies about UFOs in order to convince this guy that the U.S. government had a UFO program. And he later came out and admitted that he had lied. The government official had lied to this other fellow in order to drum up disinformation about the topic. Now, ironically, he now goes to UFO conventions and asserts still that there are real UFOs, that not everything he said was a lie, but that he did in fact lie. And the metes and bounds of those lies are hard to pin down. That's weird. That's really tough for me to get on board with. In the law, you have someone say, yeah, I lied. Okay, well then how are we supposed to believe this claim? Or if you catch them in the lie, you just say, were you lying then or are you lying now? One of them's a lie. And which one is it? And how do we believe you? How do we know which one is the lie? You're just saying that one is a lie because it's expedient to you now. That's the situation we're in. Grush seems like a pretty honest guy, but are the people he's talking to honest? Or are they themselves beholden to a government agenda to spread a false narrative that's not unprecedented? So when you're looking at this stuff, you need to have a healthy dose of skepticism. The salt of this meal, the savor of this meal has to be skepticism. It's not just a grain of salt. You need the whole cylinder, the whole tube of Morton's. That's how much salt you need. So we've got some more statements. Political news correspondent from Vox, Andrew Prokop, said skeptics question whether Grush is just repeating tall tales that have long circulated through the UFO community. That's what I'm saying. Suggesting he may just be a gullible sap, if not an outright fabulist. Yeah, that's the real concern. Like the UFO community was 100% on board with the government cover-up until Grush came out and said, hey, there's a government cover-up. And then it's like, well, now we don't believe you. Ezra Klein from the New York Times posted a podcast interview with one of the original publishers of this article related to Grush, noting that the main reactions to a recent story about Grush have been to either embrace it as definitive truth or dismiss it out of hand. So I'm just saying that there is evidence out there that UFOs are real, that they've been to the Earth, that the government has had contact with them. It seems like whenever they show up, helicopters circle and chase them away really quickly. And what I'm suggesting is that these hearings are meant to distract us from the actual very real dangers that we face. War, nuclear war, government corruption, money laundering, all kinds of things that we really ought to be concerned with in order for our society to function as intended, that are being covered up with some hand waving regarding UFOs. Matt says, for me, it's hard to imagine in the vastness of space that Earth is the only planet that can sustain life. But to think they're coming all the way to Earth for some interstellar butt play is the hard pill to swallow. Yeah, so mathematically, that's what I'm saying. So mathematically, we have the law of large numbers. And what the law of large numbers says is that if there's a remote possibility that something happens, as long as you have enough iterations of that thing occurring, it will happen, because in the end, all probabilities play out. So, for example, the lottery is a great example of the law of large numbers. Any one ticket's chance of hitting the winning jackpot is practically zero, but it's not zero. It's just practically zero. So if you buy one ticket, you are guaranteed to lose. But on the other hand, the probabilities are such that if you were to buy 10 million tickets, the chance of you winning now goes up to 1 in 6 or 1 in 60. And you now have a much higher probability of winning because you've bought enough tickets or enough variations of the numbers to ensure that you have almost certain chance of winning. So when there's a jackpot of billions and you have people buying in, sometimes you have multiple people getting the jackpot, multiple tickets having the jackpot. Well, that's kind of how you look at space. What are the conditions that are right for life? Well, you have to have a certain distance from the star that they orbit so that water is liquid at standard temperature and pressure. You have to have certain proteins, certain elements in the atmosphere in order to make amino acids that eventually form proteins. And then you have to have other conditions that are present. And what those conditions may be, we don't know how many are absolutely necessary. But chances are that there's quite a number of them. And so that the probability of any one planet having those exact conditions besides this one is probably close to zero. We've looked at lots of planets, but not enough to really pin down that they are absolutely certain, or that we can be absolutely certain that any of the ones that we've seen could sustain life. Gravity, is the gravity right? Is the atmosphere right? Is the magnetic field right? And so there's just so many planets that even though there may be a small possibility of any one planet having or sustaining life, we know that by the law of large numbers, there should be more than one, at least more than one. We have one for sure that we know of because we're on it, but there should be more than one. We just don't know where to look to find it. And so the question of, well, maybe life is a short time span thing. Maybe planets that have hosted life in the past no longer do because they ran out of time and they used up their resources or whatever. And then it's a time frame thing. And you bring up a great point, Matt. Maybe they find our person sniffing president as odd and off-putting as we do. Well, I think you'd be surprised how endearing some people find that behavior. I don't personally, but some people find it very endearing. So maybe that's the case. But the question of, are we alone in the universe? I think it's still up in the air. Maybe it is the case. This planet is unique. The law of large numbers seems to intuit otherwise. That the logic would dictate that that's not the case. If it happens once, it can happen again. And it will happen again, just based on probabilities. So I think we can probably mathematically say that there are other inhabitable planets, and they probably are inhabited now. But because of the great distances and the limitations of physical travel, it may be impossible for us to ever reach them or them to reach us. So I don't know. The question of whether we are alone in the universe is different than what I'm posing here, which is, are Grush's claims believable? Government cover-ups, we have lots of evidence of those. So whether there's a government cover-up, I think we can safely say absolutely yes. As far as his other claims, whether there are UFOs or UAPs in government possession, and then likewise whether there are non-human pilots of those craft in government possession, is a bigger stretch. We have not seen any hard evidence of either of those. And what would it take for me to believe? I would need to see something more than the grainy videos that the military has produced, more than the hearsay testimony that Major Grush has produced. There would need to be something more. And on the other hand, you'd have to look at, well, then why even bring it up? What's the motivation for convincing the public that there's this space-based threat, or interplanetary vessels that have reached Earth that are in our possession. I can think of a lot of reasons. One, the primary reason is that the government likes to keep us in fear. And there's really has not been kind of a uniting, there's nothing as uniting to the American people and to the world in general as tragedy that strikes all of us, or strikes one of us in such a way that it sends ripples throughout the international community. This very thing, this idea of a non-human threat, was the plot to Watchmen, right? And Matt, I know you've read Watchmen, and Ozymandias's whole plot revolves around creating non-human biologics and using Dr. Manhattan's abilities to kind of materialize these things in a major city in order to unite humanity behind a common goal to protect Earth from alien threats. And it's just absolutely, it's been done before. So is the government trustworthy? I think we can safely say no, they're not trustworthy. The problem we have now is that there's two different narratives, opposing narratives. Government saying, hey, we don't have UFOs on one hand, and yet they're feeding lines to Major Grush to say that they do have UFOs. So there's two competing narratives. In public, they say that there's no cover-up. There's no UFOs in our possession. But privately, they're feeding lines or lies to Major Grush to say that they do have them. Why? Why would they produce two competing narratives and then create this kind of level of deniability? And I think they're talking out of both sides of their mouth. So I don't know. I don't trust the government on any degree. And the fact that they've created both of these narratives simultaneously means that they're trying to create conflict and confusion. So to that end, I'll leave it to the viewer, leave it to you guys. Are the UFO hearings claims legit, or are they Psy-Op? What do you think? And let me know in the chat. Apologize for our guest canceling last second. I wanted to get some kind of discussion out there for us, because we had tired of canceling episodes right on the last second because our guest disappears. And there's plenty for us to talk about. There's plenty of weird things for us to talk about on the thresholds of reality. But the one thing that I kind of take as the takeaway from the many months we've been doing this show is that the one thing you cannot trust is an official narrative. Official government narrative is never accurate. And in many cases, it's the exact opposite of the truth. And there's some rules of thumb to kind of navigate these types of claims. One of them is if you can't tell the motivation, look at the result and assume that the result is intended. So if the result is confusion, then you assume that they were intending to sow confusion, and that was the intention all along. And there's other rules of thumb that if someone says something one time, they're just talking. If they say it twice, that's persuasion. If they say it 3 times or more, it's themselves they're trying to convince. And the government says these things over and over and over again because they're trying to sell the lie to themselves as much as anybody else. At any rate, want to hear your thoughts on the UFO. If you have evidence or claims that you want to bring forward, I hope you consider this show as a great place to do it. I want to thank Matt and Explosion Noise for tuning in and being so active in the chat. This show is always a lot more fun when you guys are participating. And if you guys want to see more, make sure that you like, comment, subscribe. We're going to be pushing these later back into the afternoon so that we can get more Kyle. I know you guys love Kyle. I love Kyle. We want to get more Kyle on Threshold. So we're going to push him back in the afternoon. So hopefully he can get more screen time. Anyway, that'll do it for us. So until next time, keep on exploring the edges of the unknown.